It is a little before 5:30 in the morning. I am waiting for Sam, and we are going to go and try and find some parakeets. These are tropical birds that are living in Chicago, and they have, for the last 30 years or so, survived the often brutal Chicago winters. So these birds shouldn't be here, but somehow they're surviving. And we're gonna try to find them.
The monk parakeet, a bird species that's native to South America, has been living in the urban wilds of Chicago. And maybe even stranger than its survival here is its mysterious decline in recent years.
There used to be 400 birds just in Hyde Park before the population decline started to happen.
This is Stephen Pruett-Jones, faculty member at the University of Chicago in the Department of Ecology and Evolution. I'm talking to him over Skype because he's doing research in northern Michigan this summer, but he's been a longtime monk parakeet aficionado.
I moved to Chicago in 1988 to begin my faculty position, and I've been studying monk parakeets ever since. I first saw them on Lakeshore Drive and have been fascinated by them and have been interested in them and studying them ever since.
Historically, the largest concentration of monk parakeets has been in Hyde Park, a neighborhood of Chicago near the campus of the University of Chicago. Within that area, Stephen has told us about a few locations where we should be able to see some birds, if they're still around.
So we're at a golf course right now, the Jackson Park Golf Course, and we've been told that the birds like to live around the driving range. So we're gonna check out the driving range and see if we see any birds.
Exactly how they got there is a mystery, but we can make some educated guesses.
You only know about monk parakeets because that's the only species that we have here in Chicago, but beginning in the 1950s or so, the pet trade has imported more than 75 species of parrots as pets. But now, of those, 23 are now breeding in the United States.
So monk parakeets were shipped here throughout the 1960s and 70s, and somehow a large number of them escaped. There are a couple ways this could have happened, and it might not have been by accident.
Getting a parrot is not like getting a hamster. Parrots are unbelievably intelligent animals, and if you want them to be happy and healthy, you have to give them a lot of stimulation and exercise and an appropriate cage. And I mean, they're as much work as a dog is, I believe.
Yeah, they're expecting them to be sort of ornamental, like they'll be in the cage.
Yeah. If you're expecting them to be a living plant, you're going to have trouble.
I think that's the main reason, like, a lot of these monk parakeets were probably let go, because people couldn't.
That's certainly one of the hypotheses.
And if you get enough releases like this, eventually you have a large enough number of monk parakeets living in the wild to have a viable population. So we found a nest here, but not any birds. Not any monk parakeets anyway. It's kind of funny, the nest is over there right by the driving range on a light pole and like just an open area, and then like, I don't know, 50 yards to this way is a bird sanctuary. It's like the perfect place for birds, it looks like. But the monk parakeets don't seem to be making the nest over here. They made it over by the driving range. It's like they like to make it hard on themselves.
Chicago is not the furthest north that they occur, but in Chicago, they experience the most severe weather of any place that they occur.
Yeah, so this might be the biggest question I have. How have they survived? As I've said, they're tropical birds. They're not accustomed to the winters we experience here in Chicago. Yet they have survived for almost 40 years, and they're not migratory birds. Most birds native to Chicago, like robins, they migrate south for the winter. Monk parakeets stay here year-round. How do they do it?
There are approximately 330 species of parrots in the world, and only one of those species builds its own nest. And that species that builds its own nest is the monk parakeet.
And they live in these nests year-round. Sam and I saw a lot of these nests on our hunt for the birds. They're pretty easy to find even when they're not out in the open on a light pole, because they're often large, ranging from about the size of a beach ball to maybe the size of a hammock. And I don't know of any other birds in the Chicagoland area that make nests that big and intricate.
All right, so I think we found 4 nests here.
Yeah,
looks like 4 nests, but we didn't see any birds. Stuck around for a bit to see if there was any activity, but didn't see anything. I mean, it doesn't look like the nests are abandoned. I mean, they look pretty well maintained, but I don't know if maybe they're just really well built and they last for a while. Maybe the birds left or died recently, and there just hasn't been enough time for the nests to fall apart.
but they need more than nests to survive the winter.
The food is the main thing. If we didn't have backyard bird feeders, they would not survive.
Monk parakeets have a variable diet, so they can basically survive off anything we put in our bird feeders throughout the winter.
In other words, if we did not put out bird feeders, monk parakeets would not be in Chicago.
Yeah, so we're keeping them alive. Despite seeing many nests, we still hadn't seen any monk parakeets.
Well, I mean, you got to think of it too. We're looking for one of a couple hundred birds in like a really large area.
Yeah, maybe the chances of seeing them aren't that good. I don't know. A couple hundred birds in
10 square miles.
10 square miles.
So this next place we're going is Washington Square Park.
Yep. Next time we should look for flightless birds. You know, Sam, I've actually seen the birds before. I don't think I've mentioned this, is that I have seen them. So that was like in the winter, and or like the fall when the trees didn't have any leaves, but I saw them and they were like bright green. I was like, there's like bright green like parakeets in the tree there. Yeah, and it was really crazy looking.
Reading about it, that's like the best time to see them actually is in the wintertime.
Yeah, but after decades of living and thriving in Chicago, the monk parakeet population is declining.
They're increasing around the country. It's just that Chicago is experiencing a decline.
At first, Stephen and his colleagues thought the birds might be dispersing into the suburbs, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So another theory is that the population is being killed off by a disease, possibly something like the West Nile virus. But so far, there's no evidence for this. So then, what is killing these birds?
The truthful answer is we have absolutely no idea. Let me back up. There is one other hypothesis that I haven't mentioned, is that a couple of winters ago, we had one of the most severe winters that we've ever had in Chicago. That it was either 2 or 3 winters ago, we had like 82 inches of snow, I think it was. The third snowiest winter in Chicago history.
Stephen received emails from people in the Hyde Park area who reported seeing dead parakeets in the snow.
One person wrote and said he saw a group of 3 parakeets whose feet had been frozen off because of the snow, and he didn't know what to do. And eventually the parakeets died because they could fly, but they couldn't land anywhere because they'd lost their feet. So we know that absolutely happened. A lot of birds died a couple of winters ago when we had that really severe winter. We don't know whether that's the general cause of the population.
Another expert we contacted told us the monk parakeets were all gone. There were no birds left to find. Whatever had caused their decline had already wiped out the entire population. It'd be a real shame if they were all gone, and I only got to see them that once, because I don't think I really understood how special it was to see them in the first place. Because think of all the things that had to happen to bring those parakeets within my field of vision. Someone had to capture them in South America and ship them all the way to the United States. Then those birds had to somehow escape, either by accident or on purpose. Then the population had to survive 30 winters, and that depended on traits and behaviors developed over millions of years in a completely different environment, traits that just happened to benefit them here in Chicago. But this happens all the time with evolution. Traits and characteristics become useful in new and accidental ways. The history of life on this planet is nothing more than a combination of unintentional events that come together to produce a surprising and sometimes beneficial outcome. But we hardly ever notice it because the accident appears seamless. If the monk parakeets hadn't been so exotic looking, if their green coloration hadn't been so stark against the gray Chicago winter, I would never have seen them in the first place.
I guess coming to this, I was like, oh, maybe we're not going to see many birds, but now I really want to see one.
Yeah, I know.
Like, now that we're down here, like, I'm really like, oh man, I want to see a parakeet in this park.
There's a bird, or multiple birds, making this sort of chirping sound.
I was playing the call a little earlier, and it does sound like that. It's somewhere up there.
Oh, I see the bird.
Where?
See right there on that branch?
Was it a parakeet?
It looked kind of greenish.
So you think you saw it?
I saw the bird making that noise. It's hard to tell what color it was. Oh, there they are, right there. It's a flock of them.
Where? Oh yeah. Went up into that tree. Oh man. I think they know we're filming them. Run, Matt, run.
We didn't get a clear shot of the birds, but we definitely saw them. It was a flock of 3 to 4 monk parakeets, and it looked just like this. And they sounded just like birds you'd hear in a pet shop. It was a relief to know that they weren't gone, that you could still find monk parakeets in Chicago. Because if they were gone, it would be our fault. If the parakeets died out after all they had been through, after all we'd put them through, it would make their 35-year presence here merely a long reprieve from a certain death. They would have died for no better reason than we thought they would make good pets. But the monk parakeets have proven to be more than what we make of them. Despite the fact that many aspiring parakeet owners found the birds too hard to live with, monk parakeets have adapted surprisingly well to living with us. And through all the happenstance that brought the monk parakeets to Chicago and allowed them to flourish, that might be the most fortunate accident of all. So what do you think? Should we still feel responsible for the monk parakeets since we brought them here? I mean, after all, they're technically an invasive species, so maybe we should let them die off. Let us know in the comments, or you can go over to our Twitter @GoodStuffShow and respond there.
If you like this video, consider clicking the thumbs up button. If you didn't like this video, you don't have to do anything. Just don't have to do anything. If you want to help keep the show going, please consider going to our Patreon page. And of course, subscribe if you want to see more. Now to respond to some of your comments from last video about the history of American beer. Paul Christo pointed out that in the chart of new beer breweries, there was a plateau of brewery growth in the US from 1997 to 2007. Actually, if you look closely at the chart, it wasn't a plateau, it was actually decreasing a little bit until 2007 when you see a huge spike into today. We asked Ray Daniels about this and he said that there was simply a lot of bad beer out there. Craft beer was still relatively new and the demand was so high that there was a huge influx of breweries in the 90s. Some of it was good, but a lot of it was bad and consumers were disappointed. The result was a collapse of craft brewery growth and a huge influx of imported beers during that period. Many craft brewers left, but those that stayed focused on making good beer. And they learned how to participate in business in a long-term way by partnering with distributors and retailers. Hopefully they got it right and craft beer is here to stay. Until I drink all of it. Quiet Alien talks about why it's a shame that big beer companies are buying up small craft breweries, and some are just putting out beer that seems like craft brew even though it's not, like Blue Moon for instance, which is owned and made by Coors. And in my opinion, it's not really that good. You can get better Belgian-style beer elsewhere. His comment was long, but his too long didn't read at the bottom was, everything is terrible and beer must be saved. Yes, it is unfortunate that big companies are buying up small breweries, but it does seem like small breweries are still cropping up everywhere, and I'm optimistic that I'm going to still be able to shove delicious, delicious beer in my face. Perhaps it is up to us beer drinkers to do a little research and find out where our beer comes from. That can actually be part of the fun. One Infermo Bastardo points out that after working a long, hot day in the summertime, there's nothing better than a cold, close to water beer. You know, I agree with you. I'll still drink a Pabst or a Miller every now and then. Though I will say there are plenty of Pilsners and lagers out there that are the similar style that I like better, that have more flavor. And then again, in that situation, it might not matter at all. Also, better make sure those beers are very cold or they'll taste like That is all. Drink responsibly, or not at all if you're not of age. And stay in school, don't do drugs. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.